You're listening to Lawsuit Proofing Your City, a podcast with Scott Grossberg. Each week, we explore current trends in lawsuits brought against cities and give you tips, tricks, and techniques for fighting back. And now, here's your host, Scott Grossberg.
Welcome back, everybody. In today's episode, we're going to talk about kids, minors, children, and those who participate in your agency programs. And more importantly, let's talk about who can and can't sign agreements on their behalf. Simply, in California, no one under the age of 18 may generally enter into a binding contract or an agreement. And you can't avoid exposure or transfer risk if you don't have a release of all claims or a waiver that's signed on behalf of the minor. Now, let's face it, you've got children participating in city programs and events. But I tend to see that some of my agencies don't have proper releases, or in some cases, they don't use them at all. And if you have outside providers, outside companies, and nonprofits bringing minors to your facilities, that creates an even bigger headache because now staff doesn't know what to do with them. So, what are you having people sign when you have minors involved in your programs? And generally these fall into four categories: a general liability release, a depiction release, a waiver, or a facility use agreement. Now, to make matters worse, a lot of times I'm finding when I do training across the state that staff doesn't realize who can and cannot sign a legal document. And I get it. Let me back up a minute here. I get that sometimes our elected officials, our politicians, want to make things easy for the public and want you to ignore legal requirements. I've had this happen, for example, in aquatic centers where the elected officials want the public to be able to come in and use the facilities without signing anything. The reality is that in order to have a binding agreement that helps transfer risk away from your agency to someone else, or to eliminate or insulate you from liability at all, you have to have an agreement that is signed by either a parent or a legal guardian. Now, a parent, it's kind of self-explanatory, and I'll get to that in a minute, but a legal guardian, that's really misunderstood by staff. And simply, a legal guardian is a primary caregiver for a minor, and it requires someone who has been appointed or approved by the court. It is not a grandparent, a step-parent, a neighbor who just brings the kids, in a group to your facility. An adult actually needs a court order that enables them to make decisions on behalf of the minor. So how do you ensure that only a parent or legal guardian is signing the agreement on behalf of the minor? What do you actually need to check? Well, I like to just tell people, don't leave your common sense at the door. I am not asking you to do a background check every time someone shows up to bring their child to one of your events. Your job is to be reasonable. You are entitled to reasonably rely on representations that are made to you. And if someone brings a child to your facility and attempts to enroll them in or attempts to have them use your facilities and services, if they lie to you, then there are remedies for that as well. Now, I am not, and I'm going to underscore the word not, I am not a big fan of having parents or legal guardians sign waivers and releases and facility use agreements online. There's no way when someone's using online facilities for you to even check that it's the person whose name is ending up on the document. What I am asking you to do is to ensure that the person signing the agreement is who they say they are. Ask for some form of valid ID, and generally that's going to be enough. Ensure that you have a custom and practice or a policy of having everyone who participates in a city program, and I mean everyone, sign a release. And by the way, another little tidbit for you, please make sure that if you're using releases that are in English, that the people who are reading, reviewing, and signing the agreement can read and understand English. And again, that's common sense and something that you can tell for the most part. There will be exceptions, but for the most part, when you're having a face-to-face interaction with them. I want you to ensure that you have a depiction release in the event you're shooting video or taking photographs. And I want to back up here and tell you I am not a big fan of photographing minors in any type of setting. It's far too easy and very inexpensive to go license model photographs from a site online that show kids having fun or engaged in an activity that you'll be able to use, rather than you running the risk of posting a video or a photo and you've got some predator or stalker out there and then who uses a reverse image search online to find somebody. And finally, I want you to ensure that if an outside agency or provider is involved with your facility or your program, that your agency is an actual additional insured under that outside agency's or that provider's insurance policy. And I'm going to be covering some of this in a later episode, but I have actually seen some of those accord certificates falsified. You want to actually see the policy, and you want to see that your agency is listed as an additional insured. And that's it for today's episode. Thank you for joining me. Until next week, here's to us taking back the courtroom together.
You've reached the end of another episode of Lawsuit Proofing Your City with Scott Grossberg. If you like our show, we'd love for you to subscribe, rate our broadcast, and leave a review. You can always check out lawsuitproofyourcity.com for more information and show notes. And remember to go to the archives section on our website for previous podcasts. This podcast is for general information only and not intended to be legal advice nor the formation of a lawyer-client relationship. Stay tuned for our next episode, and thank you for listening.